Story 1. I have always been a moderate conservative and consider myself a Republican. Until now, I was apathetic about politics, much to my husband's dismay because he loves talking about politics. I was too busy with my children for the last 7 years to pay attention to how far the right had gone. I knew Donald Trump did bad things, but I did not have the mental energy to dig into it. I became deeply involved in reading and informing myself about the spread of the coronavirus when it started in Asia. Donald Trump did one bad thing after another, crippling our response and confusing the public. This resulted in a country divided when it should have been united against the virus. It all got my attention and enraged me. Finally, I saw the petty and selfish things he has been doing. The pandemic revealed everyone's true colors. After George Floyd was murdered and peaceful protests were met with more brutality, Donald Trump encouraged the violence and orchestrated a brutal, unconstitutional clearing of peaceful protesters to get a photo opportunity. That was the last straw. I started to look into Joe Biden. I am no Biden supporter and had never paid much attention to him. I also heard negative rumors. Old, creepy, senile, and prone to gaffes. Compared to the damage Donald Trump has done in the last 6 months, I will take the creepy, rambling grandfather. I then watched Joe Biden's interview with Trevor Noah and was surprised. He is quite eloquent and much more human than Donald Trump, who acts like a toddler. Joe Biden has my vote. My fundamental beliefs have not changed, but the Republican Party has devolved and is led by a narcissistic, petty, racist, childish coward. We cannot have 4 more years of this. Story 2. When he gassed innocent protesters with tear gas to obtain a photograph of himself holding a Bible. Story 3. I did not vote for him, but I do not understand why the remark, "I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I would not lose any voters," was not the end. The idea of supporting a political leader who jokes that he could murder someone and still be adored by the American people makes me nauseous. Story 4. Before the impeachment, I was not very angry with him. I had never voted for him and had no plans to vote for him this year either. I voted for Mitt Romney in 2016 and 2018 because I like much of the work he has done for my state despite other issues. I was surprised by Mitt Romney's vote to impeach and even impressed in a way. I knew he had committed career suicide by doing this, but the backlash he received from within his state, from the Trump administration, and from the Republican Party as a whole was disgusting. When Mitt Romney was potentially exposed to coronavirus disease 2019 and Trump sarcastically said, "Gee, that's too bad," he almost openly expressed how little he cared whether my senator lived or died. That was it. The president is dead to me until a new one is elected. Fuck Trump. Story 5. In 2016, he demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that he completely lacked any moral fabric by attempting to disparage Senator John McCain's military record because he had been captured. Update: okay, a bit of a distress call. A couple of days after this post, my site-wide account was permanently suspended due to multiple repeated violations of Reddit's content policy. I have no idea what that is about, and there has been no response to my appeal. Any ideas? Thank you. Update 2. My suspension appeal was eventually upheld with no explanation. Story 6. Name-dropping George fucking Floyd while talking about economic growth. Story 7. They are stripping wildlife and environmental protections. Goodbye, investment growth. We had a good run. I'll miss you. Story 8. His unprofessional attitude toward General James Mattis was my turning point. The man is a military genius and a true patriot. Story 9. When I realized I was an independent thinker and did not have to support everything my parents did. Story 10. 2020. I retain my political leanings. I am a fiscal conservative with compassion for my fellow citizens. I consider myself an independent and a moderate conservative. I value differences of opinion and believe our collective ideologies make us stronger. We do not need to be a nation of only liberals or only conservatives, only socialists or only capitalists or only whites, Hispanics, Asians, or blacks. I have always believed that the diversity of Americans makes us stronger, gives us more answers, and allows us to achieve greater stability in our society. We have more to contribute because of our diversity. For years, I have watched with growing concern the division in our society and in our politics. I am 59 years old, and we seem much more partisan than I remember. It used to be that lawmakers could disagree civilly and debate vigorously while maintaining respect and the ability to work together. Now it seems we have a culture of uncompromising opinion. When we encounter this in our neighborhoods, we have coined a name for this kind of individual, a Karen. This year, starting with the evolving coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic and then spilling into and snowballing with the response of our public servants to the civil rights protests, I have seen a complete lack of diplomacy and leadership. At this moment, what our nation needs most desperately is not politics but the ability to lead. We need a leader to settle national emotions, to acknowledge the legitimacy of Black Lives Matter, to lead us in introspection, and to move us forward in constructive ways to unite people of all races, cultures, and political views. What we have is a Karen who gets in our face, self-righteously shouts at us, intimidates, and refuses to listen. Our President Karen has systematically divided us when we most desperately need unity. He has riled us up when we needed calming, blustered when we needed introspection, and threatened when we needed leadership. The saddest thing is that our country is experiencing the greatest civil rights renaissance of my generation. This would be much less painful with leadership, but it is going to happen anyway because it is the right thing to do. Karen has mismanaged the office of the president, utterly failed to lead, and will lose the election this fall by historic and unprecedented margins. We have 6 months to endure President Karen. The good thing is that people are uniting in amazing ways anyway. I believe the vast majority of Americans are behind Black Lives Matter and civil rights with equal protection under the law. I believe peaceful discourse on these issues is up to us. It certainly will not be helped by President Karen. Fortunately, we the people have that ability even if President Karen does not. Thank you very much for the upvotes, awards, and kind comments. If you read the comments, you will see positive thoughts from both sides of the aisle, which is an encouragement to me and supports the idea that people with differing views and ideas can still care about issues while retaining respect for each other, acknowledging their collective wisdom, and celebrating their common ground. Pay attention, Mr. President. Story 11. Moments I'm surprised aren't on here. Very fine people on both sides. After the Charlottesville neo-Nazi rally. Kids in cages. Mueller's investigation. I'm not complaining. The train that arrives late still arrives. Edited to add, kids in cages has since become a top comment, which is great. At the time I had scrolled near the bottom and found nothing. Story 12. I officially left the Republican Party because Donald Trump was elected. Any party that could elect him cannot represent me. Story 13. I was raised in an ultra-conservative family. I only started to pay attention to politics during President Obama's administration, when I was told that Sharia law would be imposed on America. I watched Fox News, my parents, and those around me rail against Obama every day, listing the various ways they said he would destroy the country. I cast a vote for Donald Trump knowing that in a blue state it did not really matter, so I did not feel the need to question or research it. I also assumed he would lose, which I thought would absolve me of any blame for a Hillary Clinton presidency. My biggest regret is making the popular vote closer. My family, Fox News, and others around me have all completely rejected their previous values to follow Donald Trump. Every day he does something they vowed President Obama would do to ruin the country, and they twist themselves into explanations for why it is actually a good thing. My good, wholesome Christian family members are now some of the most genuinely racist and least intellectual people I know. There are other siblings like me as well, and they give me hope. It took me about 3 months of being a casual follower of politics to start becoming involved in local elections, driving more than an hour to vote, and actually paying attention. I have hopefully started to make up for my mistake by voting more intelligently in the last primary election and by having discussions with siblings who are asking similar questions. I can say without hesitation that people who are voting for Donald Trump are either utterly apathetic about politics, as I once was, or filled with hate, whether they realize it or not. He simply is not an informed choice given all we have seen. Note: I added some context to the first paragraph to avoid confusion. Story 14. I used to think I was a Republican. This administration made me realize I was not educated about politics. The most eye-opening issue for me was the worsening situation of children held in detention centers. I did not know about this until this presidency, and I cannot stand the thought of it continuing to happen. Story 15. He appointed an oil executive to head the Environmental Protection Agency so it could be dismantled, and he lies constantly. I left the Republican Party. Story 16. I do not know whether the rally took place before or after his election. I did not see it until afterward. It was the one where he said he hates windmills and that he knows more about wind than anyone. He then joked that he could not watch television because it was not a windy day. That was when I became embarrassed about my vote and began to regret it. It only got worse after that. Story 17. When I realized his words had no meaning, I understood I literally could not trust anything he said. He could tell blatant lies and not care at all. It is dangerous. I was on the executive board of my college Republican Party organization. It has been a difficult couple of years. My family and some friends, though, still try to justify what he says with comments like he is just trolling the liberals or he is getting back at the fake news. I added this here for more context. The last presidential election was the first time I could vote. I grew up in a red state. My family watches Fox News. I went to a very conservative church. It took a couple of years of college to snap me out of it. I am pretty moderate now. It is a microcosm of thinking and hate where people keep making excuses and justifying his actions to stay sane. That is where alternative news networks come into play. They make people think they are the victims. They portray liberals and George Soros as trying to take our guns and disrespect our flag, and portray all protesters as rioters and so on. Story 18. Annoying non-stop Twitter rants, egomaniacal behavior, lack of empathy, a divide-and-conquer mentality, and tyrannical tendencies. Having to check the news constantly to see what nonsense he is stirring up. White House turnover rate. The front door is a revolving door. Anyone who gets excited to work for him resigns quickly and then calls him imbalanced, unethical, conniving, and divisive. Many of his associates are either serving prison sentences or dead, such as Jeffrey Epstein. He said he was just inspecting the underground bunker. A cowardly and awkward walk to the District of Columbia Church, surrounded by police, special weapons and tactics teams, United States Secret Service agents, and snipers, holding a Bible like a dinner menu. I live near him. He does not care about religion. What he said about prisoner of war John McCain. He said he likes people who do not get caught. He said, "Punch him in the face. I'll pay your legal fees." We now have a clear picture of how he operates, and it is not good. When the country is in crisis and we need a presidential address, he is absent or tweets something that makes the situation worse. We desperately need someone far more emotionally and mentally intact to handle the economy, nurture peaceful and strong foreign relations and policies, and remind the citizens of the United States of America that we are united and in this together to make our nation strong. He has made a mockery of the United States. Unacceptable. I did not vote in the last election. It felt like choosing between corrupt and more corrupt. Palm Beach. Registered independent voter. No party affiliation. I did not want to vote. I thought the Democratic candidates looked ridiculous, but now I will vote for Joe Biden. I am done with Donald Trump. Story 19. A relative messaged me about a week after the George Floyd protests began to tell me she had seen a post I made online and it moved her to tears. She said she was no longer supporting Donald Trump because he did not speak out about police brutality and the events that followed. I think when she saw George Floyd's death, she imagined her black family members in his place and realized she could no longer support someone who would allow that to happen. As much as I love her, her views have sometimes been problematic and even racist, which hurt me. It was a shock that she changed so suddenly, given how awful Donald Trump has been in the past. But when something becomes personal and threatens your family, it can be the one thing that forces you to see reality. Story 20. Recently he threatened to shoot looters. I do not support looting. I believe the punishment should not be death. He also claimed that the 75-year-old man who was pushed down was an anti-fascist. Story 21. To be honest, I was never a Trump supporter, but I felt that the man was not as bad as the media portrayed and was somewhat redeemable. I was essentially an enlightened centrist. Then he betrayed the Kurds. Those people fought and died alongside United States soldiers, and Trump just stepped aside and let them be slaughtered so he would not offend Turkey. I can tolerate an immature asshole. I cannot tolerate a traitor. Edit. Thanks for the awards. Edit 2. Considering that I am not a doctor, nurse, or any kind of healthcare worker, I do not think I deserve a Healthcare Hero Award. Story 22. Well, I just changed my affiliation 2 weeks ago, but I had been a Republican since I first registered 25 years ago. He had so many people removed from their jobs in his team because they spoke out about things he did not agree with. No one expects the president to know everything. He is supposed to find the best people to provide the information needed. Story 23. I was a lifelong Republican until Donald Trump was nominated in the primaries. I could not believe my party could support a man like that. I did not vote for him. Instead, I voted Libertarian. As much as I hate contributing to a two-party system, I will not waste my vote again. I have done a lot of soul searching in the last 4 years, and I 100% do not align with Republican Party values anymore. I do not care who they put in that position. They are dead to me and they only have themselves to blame. I voted all blue in the midterm elections for the first time in my life, and I will vote in November as well. Story 24. There are too many things to list. Everything he has accomplished in his presidency comes with a huge asterisk next to it. He repealed the Affordable Care Act, but in reality he just replaced it with his own shittier version. His tax reform has led to more deficit spending. His trade war took money out of my pocket, and the farmers who were supposed to benefit had to be bailed out. His proposed wall never got built, which is good riddance. He showed blatant disregard for legitimate risks to election security, such as foreign meddling rather than mail-in ballots. His failure to respond to the coronavirus harmed the country. Several racially charged issues have also plagued his presidency. I used to consider myself a conservative, but I no longer want to be in the same room with those willingly ignorant pricks. I cannot go on the internet without becoming irrationally angry at the stupidity I hear from his mindless supporters. At this point, I consider myself aggressively moderate. Do not try to pull me to either side of the aisle. I am going to hunker down here with Reuters and the Associated Press and fact-check everything thoroughly. I have independent and reputable sources. I am ripped. Story 25. In addition, for everyone commenting, please go out and vote in the next election. Story 26. I fully supported him in 2016. At first I said he was good but immature. That became thinking he should keep his mouth shut, then liking his policies but not him. I am not sure when I stopped supporting him, but now I want him out and regret ever giving him my support. Story 27. I am a Republican who is never Trump and never Cruz. I supported Kasich in the 2016 primary. At the time I thought Trump would not be able to cause any real damage, and I believed Hillary was Satan incarnate. I voted for Johnson last time, but I am going to have to vote for Biden this time to help remove Trump from office. Plenty of us knew he was worthless going in, but I think this time he has done enough to alienate a lot of moderate Republicans. Story 28. His foreign policy toward Turkey is troubling. He is propping up a brutal Islamist dictator who dreams of reviving the Ottoman Empire by looking the other way while Turkey violates the sovereignty of Greece, Cyprus, and Armenia. When Erdogan visited him last year in Washington, I protested. Support for that man is equivalent to enabling war crimes, especially against civilians in northern Syria. To be honest, his entire foreign policy is a joke. When James Mattis and Rex Tillerson left, we knew it would get worse, and it became much worse. Clarification. 1. I am from the United States, New York City. I went to college abroad and picked up some British words. Hence, whilst. 2. I am not only criticizing Recep Tayyip Erdogan personally, but the Turkish state in its current form. It helped organize oil transport out of Syria to benefit the Islamic State, still illegally occupies half of Cyprus, refuses to acknowledge genocide, threatens Greek islands with invasion, and keeps its border closed with Armenia to help Azerbaijan economically dominate Armenia. Story 29. I am 42 years old, and this will be the first time I have not voted for the Republican candidate for president. I vote for other parties in other races frequently, but never for president until now. Economics has been the most important presidential issue for me, but climate change is becoming a decisive factor. Story 30. The President of the United States is someone we are expected to admire. Who can possibly admire that person? Story 31. It is making me miss President Barack Obama, whom I opposed on policy grounds. The grace and kindness he displayed are so necessary now and are absent in the current administration. On the policy level, it began with the coronavirus. Magical thinking and daily happy talk, while people closely following the virus knew it would become a major issue. Story 32. My breaking point was the tweets aimed at people in Michigan and Virginia saying they were coming for their guns during the primaries. You simply should not purposefully turn your own citizens against each other. That really scared me. Story 33. I draw the line at the president wanting the police and the military to shoot his own citizens. You know how we defended the Second Amendment during those gun control arguments. We wanted our firearms for this exact situation. Remember? Story 34. The childish name-calling of everyone he doesn't like is unbecoming. A grown-up, especially the president, should not act that way. I can also do without constantly hearing him refer to himself in the third person and boast about how great he is. Story 35. I was a Republican until a few months after the last election. The breaking point for me was how hateful supporters of Donald Trump became. They would take the bold things he said and use them to insult anyone who did not agree with him. I could not stand to be associated with so much hate. I also believed his behavior was dangerous, but his supporters often brushed that aside because they felt they had to accept him as Republicans. I did not think that should be the case. If someone is not doing the right thing, you should not accept it simply because it aligns with your political beliefs. That is how many things are in America. I have chosen not to identify with a political party anymore. I want to state that I was aware of the hatred leading up to the 2016 election. One reason I left the Republican Party is that I realized I had been wrong. I regret not making this change sooner. My only excuse is prior ignorance and closed-mindedness. And yes, I will be voting. Story 36. It was a tough time in my life, and the idea of Make America Great Again swept me off my feet and made me vote for him. Since then, America has been anything but great. He has just made things better for himself and worse for every other American. Story 37. When he tweeted about a fake Russian propaganda article claiming that the elderly man who was pushed by the police and hospitalized for a week was a spy, I cannot believe how stupid Trump is and that people still support him. Story 38. The way he talks to world leaders is an embarrassment to our whole country. Some people are just too dense to see it. Story 39. He posted a tweet saying he would not be a bad president and promised he would not spend a month golfing, but that is what he did. Story 40. This is a difficult question. For context, I am a 22-year-old man, and 2016 was my first election. I did not like him when I voted for him. I supported Kasich in the primary and ended up voting for Cruz because he had the best chance of beating Trump in my state of Indiana. I really only chose Trump because he was not Hillary Clinton, and as a conservative there were some things he pushed that aligned with my views. However, since the election I have become progressively less impressed with him and with the Republican Party. It is hard to point to a single thing that pushed me over the edge, but the major events that catapulted me away from him are the following. 1. The Access Hollywood tape in which he said, "Grab them by the pussy." 2. Mocking a disabled person. My brother has Down syndrome, so this one really affects me. 3. This tendency to give derogatory nicknames to political opponents, for example, Lion Ted, Crazy Bernie, Sleepy Joe, Crooked Hillary, and Do-Nothing Democrats. When my father used one of these names, I told him that if he continued, I would immediately lose much of my respect for him. 4. Mocking John McCain. 5. The Republican Party's handling of the impeachment process, and especially Senator Romney's speech in favor of impeachment. 6. The photo op in front of the church after authorities used tear gas to clear protesters. 7. Perhaps the biggest factor is the impact I have seen on the people around me. After the 2016 election, People I had tremendous respect for suddenly became extremely hateful and vindictive. Perhaps it was always there and I was too young to notice, but it was striking. More generally, I am tired of the country's leader, and to a lesser extent its people, being the laughingstock of the world. I am no fan of Joe Biden, and I did not really like Barack Obama that much either, but enough is enough. In hindsight, maybe I should have realized all of this sooner, but I really wanted to like him. Some of the things he had done happened years earlier, and I believe people can change. Beyond that, he was the candidate I voted for, and I wanted to be right. There were a handful of things he did that I agreed with, and I clung to those, hoping I could stand behind them if nothing else, but after all this I could not ignore his transgressions. Barring something extraordinary, I will be voting for the Democratic Party in November. I will not be looking forward to Thanksgiving with my parents this year. When people ask how I could vote for him to begin with, my best answer is that I was 18 and my political knowledge came almost entirely from my family, who were staunch conservatives and convinced me that Hillary Clinton was basically the worst thing imaginable. Since I agreed with some of Trump's political ideas, I was able to overlook the first few items at first in an effort to keep Clinton out of the White House. I still believe my family are wonderful people, just very misguided on this issue. Story 41. Comparing his coronavirus briefing ratings to The Bachelor. Story 42. It is clear what a petulant child he is. He has no moral compass but pretends to be a friend of Christians and a Christian himself, which is laughable. He panders to them to solidify his base. I can see right through it and cannot believe anyone is conned into thinking he is sincere about any of that. Story 43. I'm a registered Republican and I voted for Hillary Clinton last time. I will vote for Joe Biden this time. I think Donald Trump is a fucking monster. The breaking point in 2016 was either the comments about Mexico sending bad people or the grab them by the pussy comments. Say what you want about prior Republican nominees, but Mitt Romney, John McCain, and neither of the Bushes would ever say or do that sort of thing. George W. Bush even did an interview in Spanish on Telemundo, for God's sake. Story 44. I voted for him because I hated Clinton. It is not that I realized I would never vote for him again. It is that I realized I had made a mistake. I cannot point to a specific moment, but I recognized that he was not simply opposing previous Democratic ideas and policies. He was saying whatever outrageous things came to mind. He is also a horrid racist and bigot, and honestly not mentally well. Story 45. It took me less than 6 months after he was inaugurated before I realized I had made a huge mistake in voting for Donald Trump. The way he handled himself, the people around him, those different from him, and his immediate lying made me realize that he is not mentally well. I should have seen the signs with the grab them by the pussy reveal, but at the time I was a Republican and wanted to stick with the party vote. Trump and his bootlicking army of sycophants caused me to switch my political affiliation because I cannot be part of a party that marginalizes non-white people, does everything in its power to destroy the environment, and discourages immigration. Please do not bring up Democrats founded the Ku Klux Klan nonsense. That was over 200 years ago, and the racial perspectives of the Democratic and Republican parties have reversed. It is my fervent hope that the House stays Democratic, the Senate turns Democratic, and Trump is defeated. Most of all, I want to see Trump led away in handcuffs for the crimes he committed before and during his presidency. Addendum. I am adding this in response to people who pointed out that the Republican Party has long done the same things I criticized in Trump. I fully admit I did not pay as close attention as I should have to prior Republican administrations and politicians. I believe in small government. I am a gun owner, and while I do not stand steadfastly against abortion, I am not really in favor of it. That conflicts with my belief that women should have the right to govern their own bodies and receive equal pay for equal work. I believe in immigrants' work ethic, and I believe it is wrong to discriminate against any race, religion, or culture. However, I was not always like this. I am 64 years old, and throughout my formative and early adult years, I lived in an environment that saw non-white people as inferior. I also spent time in the military, where racism was very prevalent despite large percentages of minorities serving America. As I mentioned in a previous post, my daughter, who is now in her 20s, was very liberal and still is, and she called me out on things I would say. It took a long time to change my perspectives, but it is the only thing I thank Trump for. Because he was and is so blatant with his words and actions against non-white people, I was able to see parts of myself in him and I did not like it. What really helped me understand the Black perspective was viewing Ava DuVernay's documentary 13th. That opened my eyes to the institutional and systemic racism that Black people have long endured. It completely changed my opinion and made me understand why the Black population is rightfully angry. It made me angry, too, and that anger was also felt for the persecution Trump committed against Hispanics, Muslims, and other groups he views as a threat. I hope this satisfies the statements about why it took so long for me to turn against the Republican Party. Update. For some reason, my Reddit account has been permanently suspended. This is the only way I can let you all know I appreciate the kind comments. Trump is now hawking beans since he obviously does not have anything more important to do with his time. Trump golfs with Brett Favre and gives a thumbs up in the photo of the two of them on the golf course. Someone said they wanted to rip that thumb off his hand, shove it up his ass, then extract it and shove it down his throat. Fuck him and his "the suburbs are for well-off families" nonsense. I hope he drops dead from the stress caused by his addled brain not being able to accept that he is a failure and a loser. Story 46. Bailing out undeserving businesses instead of the real hardworking Americans affected by the pandemic. Story 47. I think many of the answers relate back to his Twitter activity, because he has said and done some of the most irresponsible things on and off that account. The final straw for me was his attempt to take away the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and other sexual and gender minorities that President Obama had put in place. I am too young to vote, and my whole family supports Trump or is at least Republican. My brother recently tried to show me that Trump likes and accepts lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and other sexual and gender minorities. When I saw what he had done, it convinced me to change my political views. Not that I was certain I was a Republican before. I had largely been raised that way by my family. If I were old enough to vote, I would support anyone but Trump, as long as I believed they would do well in office. Story 48. When he made fun of a reporter's disability in 2015, that was nowhere near his worst action. The Republican Party's undying support for him made me rethink many of my political stances. Story 49. My turning point as a Republican was when he mocked the late Senator John McCain and called him a non-hero because he had been captured. I was a strong supporter of McCain throughout his term in the Senate and during his run for the presidency. In my opinion, he was a very honorable man who spoke from his heart, and hearing President Trump mock him was the tipping point for me. No offense to my fellow Republicans, but most of our senators have served in the armed forces without claiming a medical deferment. When I joined, being flat-footed was considered a disqualification, and I had to prove to the military entrance processing station why it did not bother me. That was the turning point for me. Story 50. I was never going to vote for Donald Trump, but my breaking point was clearing the streets to march to the church for his photo opportunity. I will vote for a Democratic president this election, a first in my lifetime. Story 51. It is embarrassing that he is our primary representative to the rest of the world. Story 52. I fell for the propaganda during the last cycle. As a California voter, I knew that if I cast a protest vote for Gary Johnson, it probably would not have mattered. I had been raised hearing all kinds of horrible things about Hillary and honestly thought Trump had zero chance of winning. I cast my protest vote for Johnson and did not expect what would happen that evening. I deeply regret my decision and what has happened to our country, and I will do everything to make sure it never happens again. Story 53. Chaotic turnover among his cabinet secretaries, especially in key positions such as Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and Attorney General, is striking. It is not uncommon for a president to keep a cabinet secretary for 8 years. Typically, they would not go through more than 3 people in a given position during an 8-year period. He is already on his 4th Secretary of Defense while still in his first term and nearly fired that person. Story 54. I'm a registered Republican and I never voted for Donald Trump because he is an awful and untrustworthy person. While I consider myself conservative, Trump's presidency and his catering to extremists on the right have caused reasonable Republicans like me to be seen as moderates. On the other hand, my parents formally switched to the Democratic Party. I hesitate to do so because that would prevent me from voting for moderate Republicans in the primaries. If everyone switched to the Democratic Party, only extremists would remain in the primaries and only extremist candidates would be chosen to run on Republican tickets from now on. I think many people in this country underestimate the power of a primary election. So few people vote in them. If you could organize enough people to participate, you could change the political landscape overnight. Story 55. I was born into a very conservative family and raised a Republican. As a young adult, I followed suit and usually just checked the Republican box without giving much thought to political alignment. As I have gotten older, I have developed a greater appreciation for human life, and I find that members of the Democratic Party tend to care more about fringe groups. So they will get my vote this year. Honestly, Donald Trump and Joe Biden both strike me as unappealing. Either one could be hit by a truck and I would not really care. However, if Biden wins, there is a greater potential for peace. I just want to go to work, earn a paycheck, and come home to my family. I am over the drama, so I will vote for Biden to help end the media circus and far-left anger. Story 56. I was a Republican for a very long time and really liked what I saw in Kasich. The moment Trump won the nomination, I dropped my party affiliation, canceled all my financial support for the party, and vowed never to support another Republican for the rest of my life. The shame I felt knowing that moron would forever be linked to Republicans was too much. I could not support it or be associated with it, and I am glad I switched. Story 57. The second he said, I alone can fix it. I knew the con was in full effect. Story 58. I voted for a third party last time because I couldn't bring myself to vote for either major candidate. I see now that I should have voted for Clinton. I will be voting for Biden this time. However, I wouldn't identify as a Republican, only as someone who thinks the neoliberal establishment is harmful to workers and to our relationship with government. Trump will never be the right answer to combat the neoliberals, no matter how much he brands himself as a political outsider in an obviously rigged system. It is up to the people to make small adjustments to ensure that we can liberate ourselves and prevent this kind of demagoguery ever again. Story 59. I was 19 in 2016. I did not like Donald Trump originally, but I would have taken him over Hillary Clinton. I actually wrote in Ted Cruz because I figured I would vote for someone I thought was proper and principled, not a flip-flopping asshole like Trump. As his term went on, I became more and more defensive of him because everything was framed as left versus right. Looking back, I almost feel brainwashed and corrupted. The past month woke me up. His comments about using the military were awful. His gassing of peaceful protesters was a wake-up call for me. His recent actions regarding transgender healthcare further proved how bad he is. Since the start of this month, I have looked back and realized how awful he has been. He is an asshole who mocks people. He has no principles and has completely ruined what I thought was my party. I was always a strong Republican and even considered running for office, but I am in the process of becoming independent because I am so disgusted with the party. No one stood up to him after his comments. For years, Republicans have presented themselves as the party of free speech, then tried to justify denying that right and the right to assembly. I still hold some right-wing views, but I will not support him, anyone who does, or the Republican Party until they fix themselves. They let a hateful idiot with no real substance take over their party and are completely submissive to whatever he commands. Story 60. This is not the turning point that was reached a long time ago, but rather a Bible photo opportunity. Story 61. I just didn't like Clinton. Sure, he's gone and fucked up, though. He doesn't care about anyone, just himself. Story 62. Mattis is stepping down. I respect that man more than almost anyone. I cannot fathom what the breaking point was, and I am terrified to read the memoir when it comes out. Since this comment has received so much attention, I want to address everyone projecting their issues with Trump onto me. We all care about the things that matter to us, and those concerns are individual to each of us. You fail to see how many of us were voting against Hillary while you were dismissing our issues with her. A friend told my wife that if she did not vote for Hillary, she was a traitor to her gender, while completely dismissing the policy issues we had. Being smug, elitist, and condescending is exactly what got us here. I have admitted my error. If you are just going to antagonize, you are part of the problem. Also, thank you for the gold, silver, and other awards. Story 63. To be honest, I am a little shocked at how recent most of these breaking points are. This is bad, but it does not seem worse than the garbage he has been doing in office for years. Story 64. It is sad that no one is mentioning what happened in Charlottesville. A woman was killed when a man drove a car into a crowd, and Donald Trump had the audacity to say there were good people on both sides. If you did not realize then that he was not mentally fit, you were not paying attention. Fuck Donald Trump. Vote blue no matter who. Story 65. I was offended the moment he called illegal immigrants rapists. I do not support any kind of racism. I always thought he was a lunatic. I may be generally conservative in my beliefs, but I am not a moron. I am not loyal to any single party. If the Democrats try to pass a bill I believe in, I will vote for it, and if the Republicans say something unwise, I will not dismiss it out of hand. Story 66. I come from a staunchly Republican and Catholic family in the Twin Cities. They are probably a great example of his base here in Minnesota or anywhere. Really, I was in the Minnesota National Guard, which has a higher prevalence of conservatives, at least in my experience. I was insulated among my social circle from anything outside the echo chamber, as many of us are sometimes. I voted for Trump in 2016 as a 21-year-old who was sick of identity politics and sincerely opposed parts of the Black Lives Matter movement at the time. I also strongly believed that neither candidate was fit for office, but I felt I had to choose. My point above was to show you my mindset at that time. Reasons: 1. Blatant lies and his disregard for factual scientific information. 2. His constant inflammatory rhetoric toward anyone who criticizes him slightly or shows loyalty to institutions and the nation rather than to him personally. 3. His constant deflection and obfuscation from absolutely any personal accountability. 4. Seeing other leaders I respect and trust as public officials criticize and distance themselves from him. President Obama, General Mattis, and many others who have demonstrated over time that they stand for the public rather than solely for their own gain. 5. His disregard for the general public, especially peers in marginalized communities. I still disagree with some aspects, but the message is clearer to me now. Black Lives Matter. Story 67. I was not old enough to vote in 2016, but I was eligible in 2020. I consider myself a moderate Republican. I was not a huge supporter of Donald Trump in the primary, but I came to accept him after he was nominated and elected. After the 2018 midterm elections, I began to rethink some of my positions and review some of Trump's statements and actions, and I gradually began to dislike him. The action that convinced me I would not vote for him was when he abandoned the Kurds, saying he did not want to be involved in the Middle East, and then less than a week later announced he was deploying troops to Saudi Arabia. Since then, the reasons I will not vote for him have grown considerably. His impeachment nearly precipitating a war with Iran, his handling of coronavirus disease 2019, and other concerns. Story 68. Tweets calling to liberate Virginia, Michigan, and Minnesota and save your great Second Amendment appeared during the early days of the coronavirus disease 2019. I could not think of anything more irresponsible for the president to do than to tell people to take up arms against their state governments during a pandemic. Story 69. Of all the issues, I am most surprised that people are not outraged by children being raped in cages at the border and his failure to denounce or stop it. People reject other petty things for the president, yet children being raped in cages are treated as acceptable. Story 70. All the nonsense, the things he has said and done, and the way the world around me has reacted and changed because of it. Everyone hates each other. The media is kindling the flames, and it will not get better if he is re-elected. Story 71. He responded to the Black Lives Matter movement with disgusting comments about innocent victims of police brutality, whom he called anti-fascist plants, and he threatened to use the military against American citizens to stop the protests. Story 72. One problem many Americans face is feeling the need to identify with one political party or the other. People often see being Republican or Democrat as part of their identity and take pride in maintaining that identity for life, sometimes across whole families. that can make political ideology feel simplistic and binary and foster a you are either with us or against us mentality. Of course, I am generalizing, and not all Americans are like that, but from the outside it can appear that way. In contrast, in Canada, people are far less likely to align themselves with one party for life. Canadians are more flexible and will vote for whichever party has platforms they agree with at the time. Part of this is likely related to the presence of a diverse range of parties at the provincial and national levels. The Liberal Party, the Conservative Party, the New Democratic Party, the Bloc Québécois, and the Green Party all currently have representation in our federal government. I appreciate the greater diversity of voices and perspectives this allows and the reduced tendency for people to attach their identity to a single party or ideology. Story 73. It takes courage to admit when you have been conned by a con artist. Kudos to you all, and congratulations on rejoining the sane portion of the population. Story 74. That tweet he made hating on Costco made me say motherfucker. Costco is an American national treasure. Do not even. Story 75. I am not going to lie. I am infuriated by how many of these answers are obvious examples of his worst personality traits and the entirely predictable results of his egregious leadership style. Both were publicly documented before the election and, in some cases, promoted as positives by his 2016 campaign for reasons that defy explanation. Story 76. A few months in, I realized he was clearly not interested in fulfilling his promise to drain the swamp and root out corruption. He was the swamp monster himself. Story 77. I am tired of the lies, especially the stupid, obvious ones. If you lie, at least make it believable. Story 78. I could not vote in 2016, but if I could have, it would have been for Donald Trump. I did not like Hillary Clinton and thought that maybe Trump could bring a new perspective and actually make some change. I gave him some respect after he was elected, but I soon realized that he was not suited for office. After the racial tensions and the issues in the Middle East that were brewing at the end of Barack Obama's presidency, the nation needed an actual leader, not someone like Trump. Although Joe Biden is not the best speaker and sometimes stumbles, I feel he can earn the respect of people on both sides of the aisle. At this point, I do not care which policies he puts in place, as long as they do not make it hard or impossible for me to get a job and survive after I graduate from college. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.